Hey, sup, pups. Welcome to another episode of the Power Up Podcast. It's a show that takes a look at what's happening in pop culture. We try to keep ourselves up to date and sharp on what's happening. We take a look at what's good, what's bad, and honestly, sometimes what's ugly about everything, with the goal of hopefully just rekindling that nostalgic spirit and just to remind everyone that we can still be entertained for entertainment's sake. Now, this time around, instead of a live show that I normally do, instead, we're just doing a one-on-one here. So we're trying something new, something different. But I'm super excited because the guest that I have was on the show before, and he has been so gracious to take the time to chat with me again. And that is, of course, the wonderful, the talented Mr. Rip. Just kidding. Vic Mignogna. Vic, how's it going, brother?
Now I really want to know who you were going to say there.
Oh, Mr. Ripley?
Oh, the talented Mr. Ripley. Oh my gosh, that was a good one. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again for taking the time to hang out and chat with me again. I think we really connected last time, and I'm just humbled and blessed to be able to chat again and kind of a weird conversation starter. I'm originally from Illinois, but we're both here in Texas. And at the time of this recording, we got over this like weird cold front, this like cold temperature. So what were your thoughts about that? That was crazy.
You know, I can't believe that the temperature is just all over the place. Week ago, it was 16, and now today it was 86. I mean, I rode my motorcycle to the gym in a tank top and shorts. I mean, it was just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. It's just, by the time our interview is over, it'll probably be 20 again. I mean, there's just I have no idea.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. I've heard people describe Texas kind of like a faucet. It just turns on and off like that.
I lived in Houston for many years, and of course, Houston is 4 hours south of where I am now, and typically a little warmer and more humid than Dallas. Dallas has been known to get some chilly temperatures and even a little bit of snow this year.
Yeah, that question is kind of based on my being from Illinois. Weather is always like a conversation starter. Like my parents always call me to check in, and like one of the first things is like, "How's the weather down there?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's fine. It's nice and warm." And they'll be like, "Oh, lucky you. It's like snowing up here." So I'm just like, don't know what to tell you. And anyway, I was looking on your X account here, and as of the time of this recording, it looks like you'll be heading over to Dragon Ball Z-Con?
Yes, dbzcon in Los Angeles. Yes, I'm here this weekend. Very happy to be and love being able to spend time with my awesome wife. But I do have a dbzcon that I'm very excited about in LA. Actually, well, it's not actually LA. What is the name of the town it's actually in? It's a suburb of LA.
So have you like been to this before, or is this like
Well,
a
I've
con?
not been, no. dbzcon is a new venture that some people have been putting together, and they reached out to me to be a part of the group because it's a lot of different Dragon Ball Z actors. They've even got several of the Spanish actors.
That is awesome.
Really cool. I've done several shows with several of those guys, Mario and some of the others, and they're just really great guys. They'll be English voice actors and Spanish voice actors. We did a dbzcon in Vegas a month or two ago. This one's in LA, and then there are others coming up, 3 or 4 others in major cities around the country. So really excited about that. And then the following weekend, I'll be at Pop Culture Con in Spring, Texas. Looking very, very forward to that. A lot of great guests and a really, really wonderful staff of organizers at that show. Looking forward to that. Then the next weekend, I'll be in San Diego at Ninja Xchange, which is awesome. I haven't been to San Diego in a while, and I'm looking very forward to being out there. And then, of course, the following weekend, I've been looking so forward to this for so long, finally getting the privilege to get back to the UK for the Oxford Card Show. And my wife's coming with me, and I'm just really excited. These guys reached out to me quite a while ago, and when they did, it seemed like it would be forever. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not until March of next year. Well, guess what? It is upon us. So I'm excited to be going there. I've got several other events lined up throughout the year, and very, very grateful and looking very forward to meeting the fans.
That is absolutely amazing. And I'll do a quick recap here of that, and I've got your X pulled up here. So yeah, March 8th and 9th, dbzcon. March 15th and 16th, Pop Culture Con. March 22nd, Ninja Exchange. And March 29th and 30th, the Oxford Card Show. Super happy for you, man. Now, specifically about Dragon Ball Z, and I know we've talked about that you voiced Broly, and I'm not sure if I've talked about any of the other characters you've done in Dragon Ball Z. You voiced voiced Birder.
The Blue Hurricane, the
Y- y-
fastest in the universe.
And you did that for a lot of the video games like Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Tenkaichi. Love those games. I love Budokai as well. I'm kind of nerding out here. I'm more of a Budokai fan than the Budokai Tenkaichi. But you did that and you did it for
Dragon Ball Kai.
yes, and that kind of ties into what I wanted to ask you next or kind of talk about, and that's involving Dragon Ball Kai. You sang the opening for Dragon Ball Kai, which very beautifully done. I've heard all of the different versions, and that kind of made me want to think in terms of like for the lyrics because this ties in as well with the new Dragon Ball Daima, which I don't know. Have you seen it at all?
I know of it.
Okay, I've only seen like episode 1 really, so can't really spoil anything for anyone, but I can say that there is a lot of GT crossover. And how this all ties in is you sung the intro for Dragon Ball GT.
Yes, I did.
I'm curious about that. Did you have anything to do because you also do music as well? Did you have to do anything in terms of translating the lyrics or anything? Because obviously a one-to-one is kind of impossible.
Yeah, completely impossible. The short answer to your question is I didn't do the lyric for those songs. I have been asked and have done several English adaptations to Japanese songs. And you're right, they're not even close to a one-to-one. You know, it takes so much longer to say something in Japanese than it does to say it in English. So you end up, if you're writing a lyric, you end up having to pad that lyric a fair amount. So somebody else wrote the adaptations for the Dragon Ball Z Kai theme that I sang, and then also the GT theme. Somebody else adapted those, and they did a great job. They worked out really great. But I've done several for other shows, but not those two.
Gotcha. So I guess when it comes to handling the situation with someone else translating the English lyrics and whatnot, at this point, does it just kind of come natural to you to be able to just listen to the original song and then with the English translation, sing it? So to the point to where it's the same, what would be the word? I'm very terrible with music lingo. Does it just come natural?
It's not difficult for me at all. I consider myself pretty solid in writing it, producing it, singing it, playing it, arranging it. I just feel like I speak that language pretty well. So I can it wasn't difficult to adapt or just to see how the lyric fit in with the melody of the song. Whether I was writing the lyric myself, which I've done several times, or singing somebody else's adaptation, it wasn't very difficult. They did a great job doing it.
I guess focusing with music, with your own personal music that you've done, have you kind of, I mean, at this point, have you figured out a way to go to that place or tap in to allow yourself to come up with lyrics and whatnot? Because I'm assuming you've done this for quite a while.
Yeah, twice as long as I've been voice acting.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Like I said, I assumed you've kind of figured out that mindset that you can kind of just get yourself into. And I guess I'm just kind of curious if that process is still the same.
You know what? That used to be the way that I would approach it. But then when I started doing it professionally and I started working many, many years ago, I started working for ad agencies. They would hire me to write jingles and music for TV commercials and stuff. And suddenly, how do I put this? Most people that write music or write songs, they do it when they feel like it, right? They do it whenever their emotions are running high about a new relationship or a heartbreak or any number of things, right? But they only do it when they feel moved to do it, right? Well, as soon as you take it as a job and an agency calls you and says, "Hey, Vic, we want a 60-second jingle. We want it to be a jazz style. We want there to be a sing in at the very beginning with the name of the company for 5 seconds. And then we want it to go into a music bed for 35 seconds. And then we want a 3-second sing of the name of the company, and then back into the music bed, and then a 7-second sing out." Well, suddenly it turns into a mathematical equation. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly it's not like, well, not really feeling like writing a song today. You know what I mean? Or I'm not really feeling emotionally inspired. Well, sorry, because now it's a job. And that is a very interesting element of creative jobs that a lot of times people don't take into account. A lot of people imagine a certain job and they're like, "Oh my gosh, wouldn't it be the coolest, most fun job ever to do such and such?" But then when they actually get that job, they realize that they have to do it whether they feel like it or not. On days that they may not be up for it, or they may not be feeling very inspired, or they may be a little sore or a little tired, guess what? They still gotta do it. That is the unspoken side of creative fields, of, professional fields.
Fascinating, I think, because it's exactly like what you said. This is a job now, and essentially, when you say no, you're saying, I don't want to get paid, and there goes your paycheck.
Yeah, you can't say no. I mean, you've been hired to do this, and you get up in the morning and you sit down and you sit at your keyboard or your studio, and you, by sheer force of will, basically, you squeeze out something that works for this jingle, for this client, and it has to sound good. You know what I mean? It can't sound like, I didn't feel like doing this, and you can't call them and be like, "I'm not really feeling up to it today." You know what I mean? Like, they have a schedule to keep, and they're putting money into this, and it's a business. So, you have to approach it like a business, like a disciplined, dedicated job, but at the same time, you wanna make it feel creative and sound creative and organic. So, that's a little bit trickier when you actually start doing a job, you know?
It sounds like you I would hope by this point, you've been able to kind of flip that switch on.
Yeah, I mean, I've had clients call me and say, "Hey, could you write such and such about such and such in this kind of style?" I'm like, "Sure." And I'll sit down and I'll create something that actually might be pretty good. But that's the result of, decades of doing it. It's a very, very different mindset than doing it because you feel like it. We could even take you, for instance. Some people out there think people that let's say somebody that has a manual labor kind of a job, right? Or something that's really, physically taxing, or something they have to get up at 4 a.m. or something. And they're like, "Man, wouldn't it be cool to just like have a podcast and make a living having a podcast? What a piece of cake, right? What a cakewalk. What a breeze," until they start doing it. And then they start realizing, "I am not up for this today, but I have to prepare. I have to line up a guest. I have to make sure everything's working. I have to do my research." Suddenly it's not as much fun as they thought it was. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Anytime you take on a profession, a creative endeavor as a profession, you often come face to face with those times when you're not really feeling that inspired or all that up to it. But hey, gotta put on the big boy pants and go to work. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that insight. I find that, again, fascinating because everyone has a different approach to their craft. It really is almost stereotypical of falling into the, what do I feel like? Why? Why am I doing this? And I remember back going to college, getting my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. The college that I went to, it was a liberal arts college, and they really pushed into the element of, why are you doing this? And well, obviously, we all need our reasons why. And I like to think that the reason why I feel called to do this is that these are gifts that were given to me by God.
Would you agree?
And I can't even describe it like exactly what I'm trying to convey. It's just the gift of being able to edit, to act, to envision something in your mind and then being able to convey that, whether that's with paper, music. People just tend to forget that it's not always easy to do that, and that you've got to learn how to just flip that switch on and to turn it around real quick. I guess that's kind of what I was trying to say. But you mentioned keyboards earlier. Is that your go-to instrument?
Oh, yeah. Got one in front of me right now. I'm sitting in my studio. I have a rock wall in my studio. I've got this beautiful setup in front of me here with my nice big monitor and computer with all my recording programs on it and editing programs, and I have a keyboard in front of me that I play different instruments and do stuff with. So, yes, piano, keyboards, that's my deal.
That's really cool because it makes me think of a musician that I really like. His name is Andrew WK, and he also uses the keyboard. And I seem to recall an interview where he talks about how he plays. I believe he said that he plays kind of all the keys on either the left or the right side. He doesn't like go in the middle because part of his persona or his sound is like he likes to play as everything as loud as possible. The reason why I bring this up is that he also mentioned that through the keyboard you can generate different instruments, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah, all of the vast majority of instruments on my albums and the songs that I've done, I generate off the keyboard. I'll play drums, I'll play bass, I'll play strings, I'll play guitar, could be anything. Oboe, clarinet, whatever. Now, sometimes, like if I want a solo saxophone, you really can't quite capture the nuances of a real guy ripping into a real sax. So if I wanted to like put a sax lead in a song that I was going to put on a record, I would probably hire somebody to do that. But technology has made it possible now to do amazing things just triggering with a keyboard. Clearly, you need to know music. You still have to know music and chord progressions and more importantly, well, I shouldn't say more importantly, but just as important, you have to know how different instruments play. For instance, if I'm playing a piano, I would just play a certain way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I'm playing a bass guitar, you don't play a bass guitar like you play a piano. You don't voice a guitar like you voice a piano. Drums, I mean, you got to know how a drummer would play. How would a drummer approach this song and kind of groove would he do and then tom fills and oh, I want to move over here to the ride cymbal and stuff. You have to understand how different instruments should be played. It's not just enough to have a keyboard that makes sounds of other instruments. You have to know how those instruments play. Like, for instance, let's take a trumpet, for instance. A trumpet only has a certain range. It cannot play above a certain range. A bass guitar. Do you know what the lowest string in a bass guitar is?
Oh, geez. Right now, no idea.
It's an E. The lowest string on a bass guitar, open, in other words, you don't put your finger on a fret. The lowest open string on a bass guitar is E, which means if you're going to play a bass guitar off a keyboard, don't go below E, because that's the quickest giveaway that you're not really playing a bass guitar. You know what I mean? Of course, unless it's a 5-string, but we won't go there. But like trumpets, French horns, violins, all of these instruments play within a certain range. And you have to know how they play. And you can't go beyond the notes that they would naturally play. And you can't do things that a real musician couldn't do. For instance, a drummer. Right?
Mhm.
Okay, well, how many hands does a drummer have?
Is this a trick question?
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say 2, right?
Okay, that was what I was gonna say, but I kind of hesitated because I thought, well, what if he says, well, technically the sticks are an extension to the arm, so technically 4.
I tell you what, one of the quickest giveaways of a drum machine or not a real drummer is nowadays the samples that you could get are really good quality. I'll hit a snare drum off a key, and it'll sound like boom, like take your head off. Great, thick, rich snare, right? But one of the quickest giveaways, because what'll happen is people will lay down a hi-hat and then they'll go back and they'll play the kick. And then they'll go back and they'll play the snare. Right? And they'll lay down all of these drum sounds. Now they got this great groove going, right? And then they get to the part where they want to do a drum fill on the toms. And they'll go boom, 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 boom. Get a big cymbal crash, right? But you know what they'll do? The hi-hat will be going through the drum fill. And the snare will keep playing through the drum fill. Guess what? A musician's only got 2 hands. A real drummer could not do that. A real drummer would lay off of the hi-hat and he would go completely to the toms with both hands. So little things like that, learning how an actual musician plays the actual instrument is a key in making it sound like the real deal, even if it's not the real deal.
Wow, that's amazing. So was that something that you were taught, or was that something that you discovered while doing your own research and went out and learned it yourself?
Me personally, you learn by doing. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
For me personally, I never took any piano lessons or instrument lessons. I just figured it out. I
Wow.
figured out that God had given me this talent. I literally stumbled across it and it just came very naturally to me. And so as I would start writing songs, I would start listening more critically to music. Could put on any song and I would listen to it and I would listen to what the bass guitar is doing. And I would break it. I would break the song down kind of analytically, like what are different instruments doing here? What's making this song cool, and how is it arranged, and where do the drums play and where do they not play, and when do the strings come in, when do they not come in? And just from thousands and thousands of experiences doing it, you get better at it. As with anything, you come to understand it and develop a skill for it.
It's just so amazing, the gifts that God gives to people, especially the one where it just clicks just like that.
It absolutely is, and I have always been very, very quick to give God all of the glory because, a lot of people spend years and years and years studying and practicing and taking lessons on an instrument, and I never did, but whatever skills I have are straight from God. So I always try to make it a point to give credit where credit is due.
So, with your love for music and your love for acting, would you say that they're on equal terms? I know that question is usually kind of impossible for people to answer. I mean, I know I've been asked questions like that, and I've pretty much said, "Oh, I love whatever both equally."
I would be hard pressed to answer that question because I've acted even longer than I've done music, but I've done music for a very long time too. And I love them both. I love them both. And I don't even know that I could say I love them both equally, but I can say that I love them both. I would hate to have to give up one in service of the other. There's that old saying, jack of all trades, master of none, right? I can do a lot of things relatively well, but nothing really well. You know what I mean? I've always I've always seen myself as that kind of a person who can do a lot of different things. God has blessed me with a lot of different skills, but I've never just focused on one and tried to absolutely, be the absolute off the charts best Olympic level at that one thing. I think I love too many things to say, well, I'm going to forsake all of these other creative endeavors. I'm going to turn my back on all these other creative pursuits, and I'm just going to focus on this one thing. I don't think I could ever do that. So I think I might be destined to just do a bunch of things until I can't do anything.
Actually, I think that's a wonderful thing. I think that's a great mindset to have because unfortunately there are people who will get focused on one thing for so long that they get lost in it, and that love and that passion actually just gets forgotten. They get burnt out.
Very good point.
Or
I don't feel like music. I'll take some time away from music, but then I'll suddenly get inspired by something, or somebody will hire me to do something, and I'll put the music hat back on, and I'll remember how much I love doing it. Same with acting. I may not do anything for a while, but then somebody will contact me and say, "Hey, we'd like to cast you in this or have you do that." And I'll be like, "Awesome. I love it." So, I don't know that I could ever give all of the others up to just pursue one thing.
you know what? I probably would say the same thing. I have so much passion for a bunch of stuff that I'm sure it'd be super hard just to give it all up to just focus on one thing. And I guess since we're talking about commercial jingles, and for some reason I feel like there's one out there, but I'm trying to think and I can't think of it. Is there a field that combines both acting and music together that you've experienced through your journey?
I mean, apart from Broadway or musical theaters in general, I mean, musicals give you the opportunity to sing and act as well. I love musicals. I've been in a lot of musicals and I love them. They do take a lot of time, which I don't have as much of anymore. But I love musicals. Apart from that, I can't think of anything. But that's a nice field that you can merge your love of music and singing. Now, a lot of musicals incorporate dancing as well, and I am not a dancer. My wife wishes I were. He's like, "I'm gonna get you on the dance floor." I'm like, "Better have a gun." I just, and you know what the funny thing is? It's not that I can't dance. It's just that I don't dance. I grew up in a very, very conservative, strict Christian home, church background. You don't dance. You don't listen to rock and roll music. You don't go to movies. You certainly don't drink, or anything like that. You wear your hair nice and clean cut, and you know what I mean? And it wasn't a cult or anything. It was just they felt the church that I grew up in and the faith that I grew up in was a very strict faith. And consequently, I never danced, but I know music and I know rhythm. So there's nothing keeping me from dancing except my own insecurity, self-consciousness.
So Footloose was a biography, really.
I gotta tell you, man, I sure envied Kevin Bacon. I thought, dang, he looks like he's having so much fun, and I will never be able to do that. Anytime I try to do it, I'm like, you look so stupid, Vic. Stop what you're doing now.
I wouldn't say I'm the best dancer either, but sometimes the spirit gets a hold of you. Like David, he danced.
That's true. And I could probably do that, but it wouldn't be very entertaining.
So another acting question for you. As a person who enjoys his fair share of video games, I was watching a trailer for a new game that's going to be coming out, Japanese game, and in the trailer they had an English dub for it. It's called Onimusha. It's a continuation from a video game series back in the day, and you'll notice right away that the dubbing doesn't match the mouth flap. Now, I can understand if this was just made just for the trailer, but it almost seems like it could be the actual dubbing used for the game. And I find that very interesting because I would feel with today's technology, we shouldn't be running into that problem anymore. Because I remember taking a class, an online class from a site called Gravy for the Brain, and they teach voice acting. And one of them was specifically for voiceovers in video games. And this was a while back. And they talked about how technology is getting to the point where the software can read the waveform and essentially the software will match up the mouth flaps regardless of what language it is. Now, this trailer, of course, could be a pre-rendered cutscene in which if it was rendered in Japanese and they just did a quick dub, I can understand that. But just wanting to know from your experience if you've ever run into that, because I know for like a Western animated series, a lot of the actors will do the lines together and then they'll animate to the sound, unlike anime where the animation is already done and you're matching the mouth flaps.
It depends on whether you're talking about Japanese or English. If you're talking about Japanese, then that's right. The Japanese approach animation. They approach it almost like a radio play. They do what we would call prelay in this country, which means they bring all the actors in and they all stand in front of their own microphones with the script, or maybe with a monitor in front of them with the script on the monitor, and they will all perform together. There is no animation. There are no mouth flaps to match. They are basically just performing it like they would a radio play, a radio drama. And then the director will take those scenes. He will do what he wants to with them to prepare them, to make them what he wants. Maybe he'll take a piece of this scene and a piece of this scene and put them together. Oh, I like the way she did it that time, so I'm going to take that one and put it over here. So he'll assemble the finished audio production, and then they will hand that over to the animators, who will then animate the characters to their performance. Much easier for a voice actor. You can basically perform the line however you want, and the animators have to match your performance. However, dubbing anime into any language, not even just English, but French, Italian, Spanish, you name it. The animation is already done, which means you have to write an adaptation from the Japanese script into your language, whatever that language may be. Then you have to basically tweak it, match the mouth flaps. One of the hardest parts of dubbing anime is delivering a natural, organic sounding performance while still honoring the mouth flaps and the mouth movements of the pre-existing video. It's not as easy as people think, and people that are good at it make it look easy, but it's not easy. Where the Japanese all get together, the actors all get together and perform at the same time, that never happens with English dubbing, because it would be impossible for everybody to hit their lines perfectly at the same time. It's not practical. So what they do is they bring every actor in one at a time, and dub the lines, and they usually have to do it a couple of times to get it to match right, or to get the performance right, or to get the performance and the matching of the flaps right, and then you move on. Those are a couple of big differences between Japanese and original animation in any language and when you dub it into another language. Now, the video game you were talking about that the flaps did match, are you talking about they didn't match in Japanese?
No, it was recorded in Japanese and the flaps didn't match the English dub.
You're saying that what was the original video game an English video game?
No, Japanese video game.
And somebody dubbed it into English and it
And
didn't match. That's really interesting to me because that would seem to indicate a rather sloppy approach to the game, because while it is true that some cultures don't have a problem with the voice not matching the mouth movements. The United States is not one of them. English-speaking countries, especially America, we are so used to things syncing up that if it doesn't sync, we're like, this is really distracting. We can't even really enjoy the show or the movie or the game because the fact that the mouth doesn't sync with the voice is too distracting. Now, the Japanese don't even care as much about syncing. Even though they do prelay, sometimes theirs don't actually sync up perfectly either, but it's not as big a deal in their culture. But in our culture, we're conditioned, our entertainment, our television shows and movies and video games, we are used to the voice syncing when the person is talking. And if it doesn't, we just can't get past it. It's too distracting.
yeah, that's why I was curious about your opinion because clearly you've worked on video games, and I was curious to know from when you started back into the day to where you are now. Because I'll be real, I've watched my fair share of Japanese movies and video games and anime where the English voiceover didn't exactly sync up with the mouth flaps, and I was able to bypass that. I've learned to not let that bother me. But to me, nowadays, it feels like we really shouldn't be running into that anymore, especially where things are now with AI. And like I mentioned before with that class, if I'm remembering what they were talking about correctly, the technology is getting there.
It's definitely getting there. In fact, it's already there. I don't know who's using it, but I'm sure somebody is, and more people will use it as well. But let me just say two things about what you were talking about. I've never worked with a studio that said, that's close enough. Let's move on. Every studio I've ever worked with, and I've worked with a lot of studios, every studio I've ever worked with was very dedicated to the voice performance matching the mouth flaps. And here's another interesting point. When you're dubbing anime, oftentimes, for the most part, the mouth is either open or closed. The mouth is not forming words and syllables. So you need to make sure that you match the mouth flaps just right. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Typically, it's an open or close. Every once in a while, they'll do some kind of an oval-shaped mouth. But in general, anime is open or closed, right? Big open or little open, but open or closed. Live action. I've dubbed Godzilla movies. I've dubbed Japanese live action movies. Now, this is a whole different animal because those guys on screen are actually saying Japanese words. And your English is not going to match the shapes of their mouth. It's never going to do it. So the most important thing when you're dubbing live action is that you match the pauses, that you start when they start and you stop when they stop. And if there's a pause in the middle, you honor that pause. And if they're yelling and crazy, you're yelling and crazy. So your performance matches as best as possible what the viewer is seeing on screen. But you're not going to be able to match the thousands of different mouth shapes that you'd get with a live action film.
I'm trying to think, is there an actual term used when describing like the shape of the mouth?
No.
I'm pretty sure there is because I remember when I took my animation class, one of our assignments was to do an animation with the different mouth shapes, and I'm racking my brain and I can't remember.
I'm embarrassed that I don't know because I should know probably.
Well, we're getting to that point where we're going to have to split ways here shortly. But as we're winding down, Vic, I just want to say that I've been enjoying your daily victories
Thank you,
on
bro.
X. Oh, dude, of course, man. Really enjoy them. And as of this recording, I really like the theme that you're currently doing. And I'm not sure if you'll continue it or not. And that is things that Jesus didn't say. And it's amazing on how God works, because I was actually thinking of something along the lines of that, more so of a specific topic I was thinking about. And that is the phrase that a lot of people throw around, and that is forgive and forget.
Definitely forgive.
Matthew 6:14 and
Oh, sure.
Ephesians 4:32.
I don't know if anybody thinks Jesus actually said that or if it's in the Bible somewhere, but that's a good one. That's a good example. You should forgive. And while there are some things that you can never forget, I would say if you forgive somebody, and this is my opinion, but if you forgive somebody, you don't continue to punish them or remind them of what they did that offended you. You either forgive them or you don't forgive them. And I'll tell you what's interesting is the scripture, you know this very well. The scripture says that when God forgives us, he removes our sins as far as the east is from the west. He buries them in the deepest sea, never to be remembered against us. Kind of sounds like forgive and forget. But at the same time, we are meant to learn. We're meant to learn from the mistakes that we make and the mistakes that other people make toward us. For instance, if somebody says to you, "Hey man, can I borrow $1,000? I'll have it back to you next week." And you're like, "Sure, man. You're a good dude. You want to be helpful. This is your friend. He needs help." You give him $1,000. Next week comes and goes. Then the next week. Then the next month. Then maybe a year. And he comes to you and he goes, "Dude, I'm so sorry. I feel so," or you ask him about it, right? "I feel so bad, man." He goes, "I'm so sorry, man. I'm so sorry. I'm so strapped. Please forgive me. I don't have it. I'm barely hanging on. I can't even buy groceries." You know what I mean? And will you forgive me? Well, yeah, of course you'll forgive them, but you probably won't lend them money again. Yes, you forgive, but you learn. You
Exactly.
learn boundaries. I have a quote from Star Trek that is perfect for this. Scotty, who's one of the well-known characters of Star Trek, there was an episode where Scotty was in command of the Enterprise. Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock were on the planet, and the planet was sending messages to Scotty on the Enterprise to try to trick them. They sent a distress signal, and it was from this ship that needed help. And they were in orbit around the planet because Kirk and Spock were down on the planet. And Scotty's like, "You know what? There's a Federation ship in trouble. That's where our duty lies. Break us out of orbit. Let's head toward that ship as quick as we can." And they get there, and guess what? There's no ship. So they turn around and they rush back toward the planet. As they're heading back toward the planet, they get another distress call. Everybody on the bridge is like, "Well, Scotty, what are you going to do?" Right? There's another distress call. And you know what Scotty says? "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me." Point being, we need to learn. If we make a mistake, if we make a misstep, hopefully we learn from it. We ask forgiveness. We all are in need of forgiveness. No one is outside of that. Everyone is in need of forgiveness. And then we move forward and hopefully we learn something from that experience. Maybe we learn something about ourselves. Maybe we learn something about others. Maybe we learn something about our relationship to others. But you do forgive, and you forget only in as much as you don't continue to punish somebody for a mistake that you have forgiven them for. But you do forget in as much as you learn from the experience.
Very beautifully put. Very beautifully put. And while I was thinking of this, I was studying and came across Matthew 10:16, where it says, "Behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves."
Oh, that's good.
And that, of course, I also find very interesting because, and some people may not know this, but throughout the Bible, when you hear of serpents or snakes or what have you, you think of back in Genesis with the snake, the Nahash, Satan. And as we just read, be wise as serpents. So interesting rabbit hole that one can find themselves going down with that. But yeah, really wanted to hear your thoughts about that, and I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Got a couple more this week lined up. You'll hear them.
Well, everyone, that's all the time that we have for today. Vic, thank you so much again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat with me and to talk and to just get to learn more about you once again.
It was my pleasure, Powder King.
Yeah, won't lie, can still turn into a powder keg at times. But thankfully, with God's help, as a kid, I grew up very emotional, was very prone to anger, and carry a lot of bitterness with me growing up as well. And through God's help, I was able to let go a lot of that and to forgive a lot of people. The anger obviously is still there. There's nothing wrong with being angry, but you just got to make sure to control your anger. And like the scripture says, let not
The sun go down on your wrath.
Amen, amen. Vic, anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
Only thank you to you, and also, as I always try to do, a very, very heartfelt thanks to all of the fans out there of my work over the years. It occurred to me the other day that I've been voice acting for 25 years, and despite all the twists and turns of the last 5 or 6 years, there have been so many thousands upon thousands of outpourings of kindness and support and encouragement. And all of you out there will never know how much that has meant to me, how much it has encouraged me and kept me going. And that's one of the reasons I'm especially looking forward to the event appearances coming up, because the opportunity to meet people and to interact with them and hear their stories and talk with them is one of my favorite things in the world. So thank you to all of you out there. Check out my social media, my daily victory, encouraging words every morning, 60 to 90 seconds. Start your day off in a good way, in a good trajectory, shall we say. I do those Monday through Friday. They're on all my social media platforms. And then check my social media platforms for my appearances, where I'm going to be doing conventions. And if you're anywhere near one, please come and say hello. And God bless you.
All right, pups, that was Vic Mignogna back again on the show. Thanks to Vic once again for taking the time out of his busy schedule to talk with me and to hang out. And to everybody who tuned in on this video, thank you and God bless all of you. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Turn on notifications to get notified when I go live or when I upload content. I'd really appreciate it. Go check out Vic, check out his work. God bless you all, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side. Peace.